It's a tale as old as time itself. Man gets shipwrecked, wakes up on a mysterious beach, and discovers an island formerly populated by sentient bug people. Now he must contend with the hordes of shadow creatures responsible for their fall. Welcome to Boomerang X. To say that Boomerang X doesn't piss about when it comes to getting you face first into the action would be somewhat of an understatement. Precious few minutes go by before you've got the titular boomerang in your hand and you're hurling it in the general direction of shadow creatures. The aim of any given encounter to take out all marked enemies during the course of a wave. Completing all waves allows you to move on from that arena and collect successive upgrades as you go. Now, you might worry that such a setup may not leave quite a lot of wiggle room for such a game to sustain itself over an extended period of time. And that's where you'd be correct, because Boomerang X is actually quite a short game. Boomerang X is laser focused on its gameplay. All encounters take place within some form of arena. Granted, they will change in terms of composition, be it shape, size, verticality, what have you, and the enemy varieties that you'll encounter will become more numerous as you progress further. But when it comes down to it, this is all about squeezing as much potential out of that singular weapon that shares the game's title, as well as the player themselves. Seriously, this game will make you work for it. Oh sure, it starts off simple enough, those earlier arenas easing you into the basics of the gameplay, but pretty much from unlocking Slingshot onwards, Boomerang X starts to pile on the complications. For reference, Slingshot is an ability that allows you to be yanked in the general direction of wherever your boomerang is situated. So for example, if you need to ascend to a great height, chuck your boomerang in that direction, hit Slingshot, and you will go flying up into the air. This is useful for tackling enemies on high up places, as well as zipping around behind enemies that have weak points located on their back, usefully marked with the presence of a big red gem. As you might imagine, however, Slingshot is just the beginning. You've also got access to a Scattershot ability, which is charged by killing multiple enemies in a row. You've also got a Pinpoint Needle attack, which can pierce through multiple enemies. That one is charged by killing multiple enemies with the preceding Scattershot ability. About halfway through, you'll pick up the Blaze ability, which triggers after getting 3 or more mid-air kills. And this triggers when you either collide with an enemy or hit the ground, erupting in an area of effect blaze of fire, allowing you to take out some troublesome enemies that may be currently encroaching and making life difficult. Essentially, in most cases, becoming a saving throw, allowing you to hold on to that health a little longer. And you've also got Flux, which turns out to be probably the next most useful thing to the Slingshot ability itself. You see, all of this zipping gets a little bit dizzying, and it's quite helpful to have an ability to just slow things down a little and figure out where exactly you're hurling yourself next. As you might imagine, being able to string all of these moves together in a competent and efficient manner becomes downright essential to your survival as it ramps up the difficulty in successive arenas, because as your moveset becomes more complex, so too does the combination of enemies you'll be asked to deal with. And trust me when I say, there's some real interesting spanners thrown into the works here. You got the likes of storm giraffes striding around the arena with maelstroms orbiting their heads, multiple weak points necessary to take those down. You got the giant frogs with the charming puke ability, and a tricksy to hit second weak point that requires you to wait for the opportune moment as it bounds up into the air, ready to slam back down onto the ground. A more recurring enemy that often strikes fear into my heart whenever it appears during a wave would be the laser orbs. These are floating eyeballs that will zero in and fire a laser on your general position. The only way to take these out is to either strike them in the eye, paralyzing them momentarily while you hit the rear weak point, or you could build up a precision needle attack, which has the benefit of being able to pierce both sides, killing it in one strike. That said, there are further wrinkles in the tale that you may experience during the course of a wave. For example, shield bugs can envelop such enemies in a protective bubble, forcing you to take obviously the bug out first before you can focus on the true target. And this is something that factors into another rather intimidating enemy that's found in later arenas, an enemy that I personally refer to as the Apocalypse Butterfly. It has multiple shield bugs and it crafts orbital strikes. Mercifully, as you deal with all of this fresh complexity that Boomerang X throws at you in its later stages, you'll find that you're also granted an ever-expanding pool of life. Granted by drinking from basins between arenas, this will increase the number of shields in the top left-hand corner. Any hit that you take is one shield. No more, no less, always clear, always straightforward. You don't have to worry about things like severity of attack, taking out multiple shield icons at once, and it also throws an additional bit of on-the-fly strategy into any given arena. And this takes the form of the red recharge pads, each capable of delivering one additional armor charge, but once used, they are depleted. They don't come back for the entire duration of that arena, so picking the opportune time to swoop in and grab yourself an extra charge can often mean the difference between victory and defeat. An additional bit of complication is the fact that these don't deliver the charge immediately. There's this short, quite frankly, agonizing wait as it delivers the charge, and if you go too soon, it doesn't trigger. If you wait too long, you run the risk of taking an additional hit that you didn't need to take. In all honesty, it's astounding just how focused Boomerang X is. Absolutely precision-tuned to deliver this high-intensity, adrenaline-inducing, skill-based gameplay. There is just zero fat on the bones of Boomerang X. It is all meat. Oh sure, don't get me wrong, there's lore, there's environmental storytelling, there's this adorable millipede NPC that you can choose to talk to that'll drop extra bits of information, but none of this ever feels like it gets in the way. It's just you, your abilities, and whatever Boomerang X chooses to throw at you next. Everything surrounding it just facilitates that core experience of weaving your way through ever more complex combinations of enemies, adjusting those strategies on the fly, and ultimately coming out the other side feeling like a complete and utter badass. In terms of the stuff that helps facilitate the gameplay, I'd certainly be remiss if I didn't mention the visuals of Boomerang X. It couches everything in this really nice Eastern-tinged watercolor aesthetic, one that allows for occasionally quite beautiful backdrops while also ensuring that the action happening on top of it remains legible. And as you might imagine, for a game featuring such fast-paced, high-octane gameplay, being able to read what's happening in any given moment is extremely important to maintaining the pace of gameplay. Sure, it's not perfect. There are occasional moments where the chaos of what's happening on screen, just the hordes of enemies swirling about, does obfuscate where certain critical targets may be, but it does go some way to remedy that by having them outlined behind any obscuring enemies or structures. So at the very least, there's always a way of getting yourself back on target. So yeah, besides the visual clusterfuck of what happens when you trigger your final ultimate ability that lets you just zoom about and kill anything that you're looking at, I would say I have precious little to complain about when it comes to Boomerang X. In fact, I think it's safe to say that I had a ridiculously enjoyable time with Boomerang X. I'm always a fan of a game that puts me through my paces, makes me sweat, and just gives me this wonderful feeling of euphoria once I've conquered it. Granted, the game itself is quite short, clocking in at about 2 hours 20 something and change by the time I hit the credits, but I feel like anything more would be outstaying its welcome, and for those who crave additional challenge, ever more insane hordes of enemies to do battle against, Boomerang X does in fact boast a New Game Plus, but believe me when I say New Game Plus does not fuck about. Heck, if anything, New Game Plus makes the standard run of this game feel like you're still playing with the training wheels on. But yeah. If you're in the mood for a challenge, if you want a short, intense hit of just concentrated, adrenaline-inducing gameplay, then I don't think you'll go too far wrong by giving Boomerang X a whirl for yourself. It certainly looks like it's got some potential for the speedrunning community, even boasting dedicated speedrunning tools baked into the game itself, so I think it's going to be interesting checking back on this every now and again just to see what ridiculous times people post when it comes to completing this as fast as humanly possible. But in the meantime, if you need me, I'll be sweating profusely trying to get through New Game Plus. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.